welcome back. I thought it would be a good time to give you guys a little update on my sourdough bread. So I know we did a video, it's been a little while back, and we'll link to that, about my starter and how I was getting started in sourdough. And my starter has survived all this time. It's been a few months now. And let me start by talking to you a little bit about how you take care of the starter. So I've gotten it out of the fridge. Alright, so if you'll look at the starter, I used some for pancakes this morning, so that's just what I've got left. You can see the bubbles. It's very active. When I feed it, it becomes really active. So what I've been doing is during the week I try to plan out my meals, and if I'm going to need to do the sourdough for a recipe or something, I'll keep it out on the counter and just feed it every day. But you can also, like if on Sunday I make my bread and I'm not going to need the starter, I can just put it in the fridge. That kind of conserves my flour. I started doing the berries, and I'm grinding it myself with my little attachment to my KitchenAid mixer. Works really well. Maybe we can give you a little sample of that sometime, but it's super cool. So I have a big bucket of wheat berries, and I'm grinding my own, and it comes out a little more coarse, I guess. I don't know if you can see that. A little more coarse than the fine meal that I was getting, but it works great. I have no issue with it. It's working fine in my bread. So what I'm going to do today is show you how I've kind of evolved my bread recipe. I'm actually using a little different technique than I showed you in that initial video. My husband's really struggling with the density. He likes the bread to be fluffy and airy, and you're just not going to get that with an ancient grain. So what I've done is adapted my recipe to include actually yeast to help give it a little more rise. So that's where we're going to start today. I am using a red, the brand is called Red Yeast. I don't have the packaging anymore, but I put it in this. So this has to sit for 10 minutes and activate. So that's where we're going to start. So I have to have the water 110 degrees. So I'm going to estimate that. I don't know. My husband suggested maybe that I actually do a thermometer on this part. The man who does everything with inaccuracies wanted me to be accurate about this. But I'm not going to do that. I am going to try to let this yeast sit for 10 minutes, which is what the package recommended. And I didn't do that last time. I did get a good rise, but because my house got cold that night, I was going to let it sit overnight and see how that worked out. It fell because the temperature dropped. And so anyway, I'm just going to do an 1.5 hour rise on this and see what happens. That's what I've been doing over the course of time anyway. So the longer rise did not seem to help me any. So we do 2 teaspoons of the yeast into the water. Alright, so I've got my warm water. I'm going to do I'm going to measure this precisely, 2 teaspoons of yeast, and I'm just going to stir that up. And we're going to let that sit for 10 minutes and activate. I'm not really sure. I don't know, this yeast is a little weird. It kind of clumps. Alright, so we're going to let this sit for 10 minutes and then we'll finish the process. Okay, so I just want to show you a little close-up of the yeast. It is much different than what it was last time. So last time I had trouble getting it to dissolve. So I think letting it sit the 10 minutes did make a difference. So I may see a big improvement in this loaf of bread. The other I was using was little packets. So I invested in a well, it was all of this in a bag. So anyway, just a little different. So I did exactly what the instructions said this time, and I hope it's going to be better. So what I've done is I fed my starter. You can see it's bubbling a little bit. And I'm going to take a cup out to put into my bread. So we're just going to dip a cup, roughly. And then that's going to be the base of my bread. And to this, I'm going to add five cups of flour. So let me get this cleaned up and I'll be right back. So to this, I'm going to add 2.5 teaspoons of salt. And I'm going to add a little sugar this time. This is my husband's idea, so I'm just going to add a little sugar. I'm going to add a teaspoon of sugar into the yeast, which we know that activates, that gives the yeast something to feed on and makes it more active. So he wanted me to try that, so that's what I'm going to do. So just sugar into the yeast, and I'm going to stir that up. So that was a teaspoon of sugar, so that's not going to add much sweetness to it. Now I'm going to measure out 5 cups of the flour. So this is my ground, or my einkorn berry flour, my einkorn wheat. And I did this, you know, like I said, I milled this myself in my KitchenAid, so 5 cups. So it takes quite a bit of flour to make a loaf of bread, huh? Now I'm just going to start to kind of get this working together, just stirring it together, and then I'm going to add the yeast in, which will give me some more liquid. Alright, so now I'm going to get my pan ready because I'm fixing to get my hands in there. So what I've been doing, instead of trying to do coconut oil, which I hadn't had great luck with, I didn't find that it helped me much with the bread sticking. I've been using some non-stick. It's just an olive oil by Simple Truth spray. And that way I make sure I get into all the corners so that the bread doesn't stick. And I give a very liberal coating because, I don't know, these pans have been used a lot, but they still tend to want to stick. So now I'm going to get in there with my hands and get this incorporated together. And I'm not going to over knead this. You don't really want to knead this bread a lot, but I do need to get all the wet and dry ingredients incorporated together. It's a very simple recipe. There's not a lot of ingredients, and so far it's been our favorite. You know, I made several trials in the beginning trying to figure out what would give us the best. Okay, so I've made it into a nice loaf. I'm going right into the pan, and then I'm just going to kind of press that down into the pan so that it'll kind of take shape of the pan. And then I'm going to cover this with a tea towel, and what I do is I'll turn my oven on 350 in the back of, because I have a gas oven, it gets really warm at the back when my oven's on, and I'm just going to set this there. And I think today I'm going to try leaving that on the whole time. It's worth a try. I think sometimes what happens is I don't have enough warmth in the room to make the bread rise like it should. So we're going to give that a try. So I'm just going to cover that with a tea towel. Get my little tea towel. And I'm just going to cover this and sit it back here to get the warmth. For 90 minutes. So we'll let that sit and do its thing for 90 minutes. And then I've been going straight into the oven with that. So I'm really varying from the recipe on that. Because what it would say is you're supposed to let it rise in a bowl for 90 minutes and then divide it and then let it rise again. Well, that was making a very thin loaf, and my husband really did not care for that. So I've been using the whole recipe to make 1 loaf of bread, and that's about all we need in a week anyway. So that's what I've been doing. We'll see how this turns out. So I'll check back with you in about 90 minutes. So it's been an hour and a half. Look at that bread. Oh, I'm so excited. So what I've typically been doing is scoring the bread. I'm not going to do that this time. We decided we were going to try it without that. I got a really nice rise. The oven's preheated. So the next thing we do is we put that into a 425 degree oven, and it bakes about 30 minutes. If this continues like this, I'm going to be so excited. So it looks like it's pretty airy too. I don't know. We'll see. 30 minutes. I just wish you guys had Smella TV, video, whatever. This kitchen smells amazing. So this bread smells so good. And it looks like it turned out pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is let it cool a few minutes in the pan, and then we'll turn it out onto a plate. Fingers crossed it turns right out, and then we'll see how it looks. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and turn it over on the rack and let it cool. Oh, it doesn't feel like it's going to drop out, so I'm a little scared. But we'll let it cool a second and see what happens. Ta-da! It was stuck just a smidge on the sides, but not enough to break it open. So I'm going to let it sit on this rack and cool, and then we'll cut a piece in a minute and see how it looks. It is a lot thicker. So I'm hoping it's a little fluffier. Like I said, we're not going to completely change the density because of the type flour we're using, but I think this is a little better. Alright, so here we go. We're about to slice the bread. I'm super excited. I still don't have a serrated knife, so just FYI, that's an important thing to have. It looks good. Not nearly as dense, I don't think. Now that, like I said, it's still going to be a little dense. Now I'm going to have a little bread and butter. No lunch today, but a little bread and butter. Never hurt anybody, maybe. It's still warm. So good. So I love how it's crusty. It's crunchy on the edges. It's so good. The density is better, so I think this time the yeast did do better with the changes I made. I really think that making your own bread is not super hard. Like I always thought, man, I don't have time for that. Look, you got time. It's fine. It doesn't take long at all. Once you get the starter going, you just feed it, and you can use it for tons of different recipes. So I think you should give it a try. I'll link my other video, and you guys can see how I did my starter, and then be watching because I'm going to have some Thanksgiving recipes for some homemade rolls and things that we're going to do with the sourdough coming up for Thanksgiving. So like this video, and I'll see you in the next one.